With the launch of pre-patch and the new expansion fast approaching, I am constantly asked how people can get my UI, and today I am finally releasing it. WeakAuras and LVUI were never really my thing, so I wanted to create a clean substitute on the default UI for people like me that still want to have an optimal UI to help them perform, without the need for external add-ons to help me do this. Before we get into the UI imports and layouts though, here are the game settings that I'd recommend you to use to make sure that you're getting the highest performance in terms of FPS, while keeping your game immersive and looking crisp. First off then, here is a script that I use to allow my camera to zoom out further than normal. This gives me a better view of my surroundings, so I can see incoming mechanics earlier, as well as mobs so I don't end up butt pulling random patrols. The final script that I use makes the game pop in detail without sacrificing performance. To make this work, we first need to go to the graphics settings, scroll all the way down to resample quality, and make sure that this is on Fidelity FX Super Resolution 1.0. Now we can exit the settings and just simply paste the string in. It's a subtle difference, but the clarity makes it so worth it and we won't lose any performance for it. Now let's head back to the graphics settings and I'll quickly walk you through all of my settings here. For my graphics, I will always choose performance over detail, but these settings find the perfect balance between keeping high FPS while still making the game look super sharp. Of course, with any of these settings, if you have a great PC, then experiment with some higher settings, and the opposite is also true if you play on a toaster. With the other settings that we'll be tweaking later, we can actually get away with lowering our render scale to basically still look the same, but dropping this slightly frees up so much resources for your game to perform better. I'd recommend around the 91% mark. Next we have the UI scale. I'd recommend to just turn this off and use the native scale for your PC, as this will be important for importing the UI layout. Though if you do want to change the size of the layout, here is where you can do that. We'll disable VSync, and then with the low latency mode we want to put it on the video reflex plus boost. Anti-aliasing will turn to advanced, and for the image-based techniques we'll go to CMAA2, and for multi-sample techniques we'll go with a 4x. To make sure we can see as much of our surroundings as possible, along with the script we entered earlier, we'll keep our camera FOV at max. Now for the important settings. Make sure you have the base game settings tab selected, as we don't want our settings to change between the open world and raids. First, I'd recommend you to whack the slider all the way down to 1 so that we can customize off of this. Shadows I have on low. This game isn't like Counter-Strike, so we gain no advantage from seeing clearer shadows, so I just turn it all the way down to save the FPS. Liquid detail goes on low as well. I personally don't really care for the detail of water. Particle density goes straight up to ultra. This is a super important setting that will help you see boss spells and mechanics much more clearly, something that we definitely need. You want to disable SSAO, depth effects, and compute effects. They do make for better immersion, but they are definitely not needed. Outline mode I have on good. This outlines quest items and all that jazz. It'll make your questing a lot easier for no real cost. Texture resolution we want on high. This is another super important setting as it makes everything in the game much clearer. Spell density we'll put on the lowest setting. Turning this way up will nuke your game's performance. Projected textures is arguably the most important setting that you need to enable. When I first started back up in Dragonflight, I had this disabled accidentally, and I was dying to every single mechanic. This setting shows where mechanics will land, as well as projecting swirlies, so make sure that you turn this on. View distance is a point up for debate. If you want to maximize performance, then you can get away with this on 1, as during fights you only need to see what's immediately in front of you. But here I sacrifice a bit of FPS to turn this up so that I can feel more immersed. And then for environmental detail and ground clutter, they should be reduced to 1. This will reduce the detail of plants, grass, and objects. It's not needed and it will save you a lot of resources. Now let's scroll down to the advanced settings. Make sure to turn off triple buffering. This can increase input latency, which is something that we do not want. Texture filtering I put on a middle ground of 4x. And again, we don't care about shadows, so ray trace shadows can be disabled, otherwise this will nuke your FPS. Ambient occlusion goes on Fidelity FX CACAO, and then earlier we already changed resample quality to Fidelity FX Super Resolution 1.0. This will make everything pop with the script that we entered. Next we'll disable VRS mode as well as physics interactions. Then we'll scroll down a little bit, and here make sure that you have max foreground FPS unticked. We don't want to cap the performance of our game, though you can tick max background FPS to save your PC's resources while you're tabbed out looking at other things. Then we'll also untick target FPS, it shouldn't be needed with the settings that I've provided. Resample sharpness you can play around a little bit with. I like 0.5, but you can increase it a bit more if you'd like. Contrast, I do whack up slightly. I don't like to put it up too high though personally, as it makes my game look a little bit darker. So that is all of my graphics settings. Like I said, these settings will ensure maximum performance in terms of FPS, while only sacrificing an unnoticeable amount of quality. Now let's quickly run through some other important settings in case you guys are new to the game. Turn on auto loot, this will save you a huge amount of time. When you loot a mob, you'll automatically loot everything into your bags. Combine bags is purely preference. I get a lot of stick for not combining mine, but personally I like to use my different bags for different items. For example, consumables in one and gear in another. Moving on to interface, this is very important for the UI layout and also my free player profile, which I'll be updating very soon. Jump in the Discord to keep up to date on that, it will be the first link in the description. For nameplates, always show nameplates as well as enemy unit nameplates and their minions. Then we must make sure that the motion type is on stacking and not overlapping. Scroll down some more, and another very important setting is the raid frames. We're going to turn our party frames into raid frames with my UI later, so make sure that you have these options ticked. Let's head to the action bars. Make sure that you have at least up to action bar 5 ticked to get the full action bar layout. While we're here, also untick lock action bars and then make sure that numbers for cooldowns is ticked. Now let's talk about the setting that ties this UI all together. Head to the combat tab and we're going to tick personal resource display. During combat, this gives you Blizzard's own buff bar that people ask me about all the time. No, it's not a WeakAuras, but it basically functions the same at an entry level, tracking important buffs you need to maintain or take care of, as well as your health and resource pool. You can actually hide the health and power bar so it only shows buffs, which in my opinion makes it look a lot cleaner, but I find it actually benefits me to keep the health there so that I am always aware of how healthy I am. If you'd like, you could also tick show personal cooldowns to show your cooldowns. Unfortunately, there's no real customizability yet for this bar, so we are at the mercy of Blizzard for what is and isn't shown, but I have noticed that they have been updating it much more recently. For example, Sun King's Blessing stacks never used to show for Fire Mage, but now they have finally added it. But honestly, for the 99%, this bar will cover everything that you need to track. You can also tick show friendly buffs, though I do feel like this gets a little bit clunky and messy at times, so I keep it disabled. So that's the personal resource display done. While we're in the combat tab, make sure that you have target of target ticked, as well as loss of control alerts, and the mouse overcast setting is very useful when healing, so I only tick this when I'm doing so. Okay, now that your WoW is running better than ever while still keeping the game looking really sharp, let's finally talk about the actual UI layout. I'll have my full UI profiles pasted inside my Discord, so head in there to grab them. The Discord will be linked in the description. So the main thing that I wanted to execute with the UI layout was trying to replicate a WeakAuras look, as I do believe there is a massive benefit to the position of your abilities on your screen. The closer your abilities are to the middle, the easier you can see what's actually going on around you, so you're less likely to stand in fire, but you're more likely to kick mobs that are casting. Of course, the beauty of this UI means that you can easily position your abilities in any way that makes sense for you, but as a general guide, my idea was to have the top 2 bigger bars as your rotational buttons, the buttons that you're going to be pressing the most, and I prioritize the top bar for the abilities that I'm pressing the most frequently. For example, Kill Command and Barb Shot for Beast Mastery Hunter. I then dedicated the third smaller bar to utility, i.e. my kick, any stuns that I have, or just general crowd control to stop mobs. I wanted my kick to be super visible so that I can maximize my usage of it in harder content. Then for the fourth bar, I dedicate this to my defensive abilities. This means that all the abilities that I need to keep an eye on are central to my screen, so they are always in view of my peripheral vision. As you can see, not all classes have 6 utility spells and 6 defensives, so classes that have more or less will spill extra utility onto the fourth bar and vice versa. Again, that is the beauty of this UI. Doing it this way makes it super simple and easy to customize it to how you see fit, where with WeakAuras, if you're not clued up on them, you'll likely just have to conform to how the developer placed them, so this gives you more freedom. The very bottom bar I personally just use for any extra bits, abilities that I don't need to keep track of, or on-use items like trinkets or potions. These can also be placed on action bar 6 if you enabled it, just above your health pool if you want potions to be easily seen. On the right, my action bars consist of more random abilities and items. I place my mounts on here, as well as any druid forms and raid buffs that my class may have. The only issue that I have ran into with this UI, to be transparent, is that Blizzard haven't introduced spec-specific keybinds to the game yet. So this means that if you use the same keybind for an ability between specs, for example Moonfire for druids, it's an impactful ability for balance, so you may want to have it on the top bar, but if you have the same bind for Moonfire on Restoration, it will also have to be placed in that position, even though you probably want a healing spell there instead. I hope that makes sense. It might be a me issue where my keybinds are just weird, but I just wanted to be transparent and hopefully Blizzard will fix this soon. Speaking of healers, I of course have made a healing UI layout too. This version centers the party frames under your ability bar so they are always in sight, something that most healers do with their frames anyway. Some players may even prefer this layout regardless of if they are playing a healer or not. Moving on to some add-ons that I use then. Lots of people have been asking for my profiles from these, so we'll go through them one by one. Omni CD shows my party's cooldowns and available kicks. The kicks I have anchored to the top of the party frame bar, and I only track cooldowns that are necessary for me to see. I don't need to see if my friend died with his defensive up, but I do need to see what CC he has left in case I need to call for it. With everything, I like to keep my profile clean, but this is really easy to customize if you'd like to change some things. Head to Omni CD, go to the Dungeons tab, and then go to Spells, and you can untick or tick the spells that you'd like to see. My profile will be pasted in my Discord. Next up, we have Big Wigs and Little Wigs. Personally, I prefer this over DBM, and the only thing I've really changed is the bar timers. The short bar timer I've placed over the enemy's nameplate, as that just makes sense in my brain. This way I have all of the boss's information in one spot. My details profile I keep in the bottom right, which slots really nicely in with the rest of my UI. I use 3 different tabs. Of course, I have 2 for damage and then 1 for healing. And I've also matched the textures and fonts of my details profile to match my plater profile. Almost 300,000 of you have checked out my plater profile so far, which is absolutely crazy as we only released it in Season 4 of Dragonflight. And yes, of course, I am continuing to update it for the whole of the War Within, but it's not ready to go live just yet. I'm really sorry, but I want to make sure the finished product is fully complete before releasing it. It will be fully updated to keep nameplates clean from all the new unnecessary debuffs, as well as color coding all of the mobs for Mythic Plus in Season 1. I've slightly switched out the fonts and textures, as before it required extra add-ons for these textures, so now it will only require plater. We also have some more great additions to the profile, but for now I'm going to keep them on the down low. So if you want to be updated on the plater profile in real time, then make sure to jump in my Discord. If you haven't already, you can get yourself the Dragonflight profile, which works in the pre-patch. But that's it. That's my full UI that I'll be rocking in the War Within. If you guys do like this layout, then please feel free to drop a like down below and subscribe to your boy. I'm aiming for 50k by the end of the year, but until next time, I'll catch you guys later.